happens when a self-made millionaire spots a familiar face from her past, now working as a waiter at her lavish charity gala. Isabelle Remington had everything she could ever dream of: a thriving tech company, a sprawling penthouse in the heart of Manhattan, and an ever-growing list of accolades. At just 36, she was the embodiment of ambition and success. Yet, for all her achievements, Isabelle often found herself gazing out of her floor-to-ceiling windows, wondering if this was the life she truly wanted. The echoes of her lonely childhood in a modest Midwest town sometimes felt louder than the applause she received at boardroom meetings. Born to a struggling single mother, Isabelle's childhood was a cocktail of hardships and resilience. Her saving grace was her childhood best friend, Ethan Hale. They'd been inseparable, finding joy in the simplest things: skipping rocks at the nearby lake, dreaming big under the stars, and vowing to always have each other's backs. But as time went on, life took them down very different paths. Isabelle's genius earned her a scholarship to an Ivy League university, and she dove headfirst into the tech world. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed behind, working odd jobs to support his family. Though they'd promised to keep in touch, their worlds grew too far apart, and eventually, their connection faded into memory. Years passed, and Isabelle transformed into a powerhouse in the tech industry, her company becoming a household name. But behind her polished exterior, she struggled with a sense of emptiness. Despite her wealth, Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that she'd lost something invaluable along the way. Ethan's memory often surfaced during her quietest moments, a reminder of the unbreakable bond she once cherished. The story takes a turn during Isabelle's annual charity gala glittering event designed to raise funds for underprivileged children. This was Isabelle at her best, poised, philanthropic, and admired by all. She moved through the crowd of elites, exchanging pleasantries, her every step exuding confidence. But beneath her poised demeanor, she often felt disconnected from the very people who admired her. As the night progressed, Isabelle retreated to a quieter corner of the ballroom, her gaze wandering across the sea of well-dressed attendees. That's when she saw him, a waiter balancing a tray of champagne glasses, his face unmistakable despite the years that had passed. It was Ethan. The boy who'd once been her anchor in the storm now stood before her, worlds apart from the glitzy crowd he served. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Isabelle's heart skipped a beat as she watched Ethan navigate the room with practiced ease, balancing the tray despite the hustle and bustle around him. His face, though older and etched with lines that hinted at struggles, still carried the warmth she remembered. Memories flooded back. Ethan cheering her on during a school debate, helping her fix her bike, and sharing peanut butter sandwiches when money was tight. How had life led them to this moment, where she was the one hosting an opulent gala while he blended into the background, unnoticed by the elite crowd? She hesitated, torn between approaching him and letting the moment pass. Isabelle wasn't one to shy away from confrontation, but something about this situation felt different. What if he resented her for losing touch? What if she reminded him of the opportunities he hadn't had? Her mind raced with questions as she clutched her champagne flute, its cool surface grounding her. But amidst the chaos of her thoughts, one thing became clear: she had to talk to him. Gathering her courage, Isabelle stepped forward. Her designer gown trailed elegantly behind her as she crossed the room, her heart pounding louder with each step. Ethan hadn't noticed her yet, focused on his task of serving drinks and avoiding the occasional impatient guest. Finally, Isabelle reached him. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the noise of clinking glasses and murmured conversations. He turned, his brows furrowing for a moment as if searching his memory. And then recognition dawned. "Isabelle?" Ethan's voice was thick with disbelief, his eyes widening as he processed the sight of her standing before him. It was a collision of two world-sure polished presence and his simple, understated appearance. Neither of them spoke for a moment, caught in the weight of unspoken words. Ethan's initial smile wavered as reality settled in. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he finally said, his tone a mixture of surprise and guardedness. "I didn't think I would either," Isabelle admitted, her emotions teetering between joy and guilt. She could see the questions in his eyes, the ones he didn't ask aloud. Why now? Why here? She wanted to explain everything: how life had swept her away, how she had thought of him so often, but how the years had slipped by faster than she'd ever imagined. Their conversation was cut short as a guest nearby called for Ethan's attention, pulling him away with a brusque demand for another glass of champagne. "We'll talk later," Isabelle promised as he excused himself. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable, before disappearing into the crowd. Isabelle stood there, feeling the stirrings of a resolve she hadn't expected. She needed to understand his story to find out what had happened in the years they'd been apart. The gala ended in a flurry of applause, laughter, and farewells, but Isabelle's thoughts were consumed by Ethan. As her guests departed, she lingered in the empty ballroom, replaying their brief encounter in her mind. Questions gnawed at her. How had Ethan ended up here? What struggles had he faced? Determined to reconnect, Isabelle approached the event coordinator and asked for the catering company's contact details. The next morning, Isabelle found herself at a quaint cafe in Brooklyn, far from the skyscrapers and limousines that defined her usual world. Ethan had agreed to meet her, albeit hesitantly. She arrived early, her polished demeanor standing out among the cafe's cozy, eclectic charm. She glanced nervously at her reflection in the window, smoothing an errant strand of hair. For the first time in years, she felt vulnerable like the small-town girl Ethan once knew. When Ethan finally walked in, Isabelle's heart clenched. He looked tired but resilient, his eyes carrying the weight of stories untold. As he sat across from her, they exchanged pleasantries that felt almost too polite, the ghost of their past friendship lingering in the air like an unfinished melody. "Isabelle," Ethan began, his tone cautious. "I didn't expect to hear from you again, let alone see you." "I didn't expect to find you either," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "But now that I have, I can't walk away without knowing your story." Ethan hesitated, studying her. Could he trust her? Finally he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's a long story, Isabelle, not the kind of tale you'd expect from a charity gala." Ethan's story unfolded, each word peeling back layers of a life marked by resilience and sacrifice. After Isabelle left for college, he stayed behind, caring for his ailing mother while juggling odd jobs to make ends meet. He spoke of nights spent fixing broken appliances for neighbors, of forfeiting his dreams to ensure his younger siblings had a chance at theirs. When his mother passed away, Ethan was left with debts he couldn't escape and a family relying on him. Opportunities were few and far between in their small town, so he moved to the city, hoping to find a fresh start. But the harsh realities of urban life quickly eroded his optimism. The weight of responsibilities, coupled with the struggle to secure stable work, left him navigating a maze of low-paying jobs, each one further from the life he'd once envisioned. Through it all, Ethan never lost his quiet dignity. "I've had my share of setbacks," he admitted, staring into his coffee. "But I've also had moments of joy. My siblings are doing well now, and that's enough for me." Isabelle felt a pang of guilt as she listened. Her success, built on opportunities Ethan had never had, now seemed almost hollow. "You've always been selfless," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Even when we were kids, you put everyone else first." Ethan met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Life doesn't always turn out the way we plan, but we keep going." As their conversation deepened, Isabelle realized how much she had missed Ethan's steady presence. Beneath his quiet demeanor was the same unwavering strength that had once inspired her. It was a strength she couldn't ignore and one that stirred something in her, a determination to help him in any way she could. Isabelle couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. Ethan's story was a testament to resilience, yet it painted a picture of sacrifices that left little room for his own happiness. As they walked out of the cafe, the chilly morning air wrapped around them, carrying with it the echoes of unspoken words. Isabelle stopped in her tracks, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "Ethan, you've spent your whole life putting others first. Don't you think it's time someone does the same for you?" He turned to her, his brow furrowed. "Isabelle, I don't need saving. I've made my peace with where I am." But she wasn't convinced. For someone who had always been a pillar of strength, there was a weariness in Ethan's tone that betrayed his words. Isabelle had learned to read between the lines, and she knew that beneath his stoic exterior was a man who deserved more than he allowed himself to dream of. "I am not trying to save you," Isabelle said gently. I want to help. You've given so much to everyone else. Let me do this for you." Ethan shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Isabelle, you've got a whole world to run. "I am just a waiter at your gala. Let's not complicate things." But Isabelle had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let their reunion be just a fleeting moment. There was more to this story, more to Ethan, and she was determined to uncover it. That night, Isabelle found herself back in her penthouse, staring out at the city lights. They seemed to pulse with a quiet intensity, mirroring her own restless thoughts. Her life had always been about control, about taking calculated risks to achieve success. But this wasn't about business. This was about reconnecting with a piece of herself she hadn't realized was missing. She pulled out her laptop, combing through contacts and resources, brainstorming ways to help Ethan without overstepping. The following day, Isabelle called her assistant, Clara, a sharp and resourceful woman who had been by her side through countless challenges. "Clara," Isabelle began, her tone resolute, "I need you to find an opening for Ethan Hale in one of our projects. Something meaningful, something that fits his skills." Clara hesitated. "You mean the waiter from the gala?" "Yes," Isabelle replied. "He's not just a waiter. He's someone who deserves a second chance." Clara nodded, scribbling notes. Isabelle leaned back in her chair, feeling the first flicker of purpose that had eluded her for so long. She knew Ethan might resist, his pride making him reluctant to accept help. But Isabelle wasn't offering charity. She was offering a chance to rewrite his story, just as he had helped shape hers all those years ago. The next morning, Isabelle called Ethan. "Tea here is an opportunity I think you'd be perfect for," she said, her voice brimming with quiet determination. "Just hear me out, Ethan, please." After a pause, Ethan sighed. "All right, Isabelle, I'll listen." Ethan hesitated at the entrance of the sleek office building, its glass facade reflecting the bustling city around it. He clutched the folder Isabelle had sent him, a portfolio of projects under her company's charitable wing, aimed at community development and small business mentorship. Inside, the bustling lobby hummed with activity, a far cry from the modest spaces Ethan was accustomed to. The opportunity Isabelle had presented was almost too good to be true. A managerial role in a project focused on helping underprivileged communities establish sustainable businesses. It was a job that aligned perfectly with the resourcefulness and resilience Ethan had honed over years of struggle. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong in this world of polished surfaces and tailored suits. As he stepped inside, memories of their conversation replayed in his mind. "Ethan," Isabelle had said, her voice steady, "this isn't about pity. You have skills that could change lives. You've done so much with so little. Imagine what you could do with real resources and a team that believes in you." Ethan met the project director, a sharp and empathetic woman named Lila, who quickly set him at ease. She listened intently as he outlined his experiences, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke about the challenges he'd faced and the lessons he'd learned. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly heard, not as a man scraping by, but as someone with value to offer. By the time he left the interview, Ethan's perspective had begun to shift. Lila's words stayed with him. "You've lived the challenges we're trying to solve. That insight is priceless." As much as he doubted his ability to fit into Isabelle's world, he couldn't deny the glimmer of hope that the opportunity sparked. Meanwhile, Isabelle was anxiously awaiting his call. She had thrown herself into this endeavor with the same determination that had built her empire. But this time it was personal. When her phone buzzed, she answered almost immediately. "It's a lot to take in," Ethan admitted, his voice cautious but not dismissive. "But I think I'd like to give it a shot." The relief in Isabelle's voice was palpable. "You won't regret this, Ethan. You are going to make a difference, I know it." True to her word, Isabelle worked closely with Ethan during his first few weeks, ensuring he had the tools and support to succeed. Their professional collaboration quickly turned into a deeper reconnection, as they spent hours discussing not only work but the lives they'd lived since their paths diverged. One evening, after a long day of strategizing, Isabelle shared a memory that had lingered in her heart. "Do you remember the time we built that treehouse by the lake?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "We spent hours trying to get the ladder right." Ethan chuckled. "And it still collapsed the moment you climbed it." They laughed, the sound bridging the years that had separated them. For the first time in ages, Isabelle felt the walls she'd built around her heart begin to crack, and Ethan saw a glimpse of the girl who used to dream under the stars. Ethan's role in the project quickly began to flourish. His practical knowledge and first-hand experience with adversity allowed him to connect with the communities they were working to uplift. Whether mentoring a struggling entrepreneur or helping design sustainable programs, Ethan brought a level of empathy and understanding that no degree or corporate training could replicate. But as Ethan grew more confident in his role, he couldn't ignore the whispers of doubt that occasionally crept into his mind. At a gala hosted to celebrate the project's initial successes, he found himself in a room filled with executives and influencers, their polished smiles and easy confidence a stark contrast to his modest beginnings. As the evening progressed, Ethan overheard a conversation between two attendees. "Isn't he the waiter from Isabelle's last event?" One murmured, casting a glance in his direction. "I heard she gave him this role." The other whispered back, their tone dripping with skepticism. "Charity, I guess." The words hit Ethan like a cold wind, threatening to unravel the fragile sense of belonging he'd begun to build. He excused himself, stepping out onto the terrace where the noise of the gala faded into the quiet hum of the city. Isabelle found him there moments later, her expression soft with concern. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He hesitated, unsure how to articulate the storm of emotions inside him. "Sometimes, I wonder if I am just a project to you, Isabelle. If I am here because you think I need saving." Her heart ached at his words, but she held his gaze. "Ethan, you are here because you earned it. I didn't give you this opportunity, you claimed it. Don't let the voices of people who don't matter drown out the truth of who you are." Ethan let Isabelle's words sink in, but doubt still lingered. The following weeks were a test of his resolve. He threw himself into his work, pouring every ounce of energy into ensuring the project's success. Each challenge he faced became an opportunity to bravado himself more than anyone, that he was more than the sum of his struggles. Then, one day, something happened that would cement his belief in his own worth. A young man named Carlos, one of the entrepreneurs Ethan had been mentoring, arrived at the office with an announcement. His fledgling bakery business, which had been on the verge of collapse, had finally turned a profit. "It's because of you," Carlos said, his voice thick with emotion. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You didn't just give me advice. You gave me hope." For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a deep sense of pride not in what he had done, but in who he was. He realized that his value didn't come from the title on his business card or the approval of strangers at a gala. It came from the lives he touched and the impact he made. Later that evening, as Isabelle and Ethan walked through the quiet streets after a long day, she turned to him with a smile. "See? I told you. You are not just part of this world, you are shaping it." Ethan chuckled softly. "You always did know how to make me see things differently." As they stood under the glow of the streetlights, their friendship felt stronger than ever, built not only on shared memories but on the respect and understanding they had rediscovered. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to believe that this new chapter in his life was one he deserved. Ethan's transformation within the project didn't go unnoticed. The quiet humility he carried, combined with his relentless determination, turned him into a cornerstone of the initiative's success. Under his leadership, programs flourished, businesses grew, and lives changed. The communities he worked with saw him as a beacon of hope, a man who truly understood their struggles and offered solutions grounded in reality. Isabelle watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. For so long, she had measured her success by wealth and accolades. But seeing Ethan thrive, knowing she had played a small part in his journey, gave her a sense of fulfillment that no trophy or boardroom deal ever could. It wasn't just the project that had transformed, it was her. One evening, Isabelle organized a community event to celebrate the progress the project had made. It wasn't an elegant gala like her usual gatherings, but a warm, vibrant festival in one of the neighborhoods they were working to uplift. Families gathered under twinkling lights, strung between trees, the air filled with laughter and the aroma of freshly cooked food. Ethan moved through the crowd, offering words of encouragement and sharing smiles with the families whose lives had been impacted. His presence was magnetic, a testament to how far he had come and how deeply he had touched the hearts of those around him. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself standing at the edge of the gathering, watching children play and parents talk with a newfound sense of hope. The scene felt surreal, like a dream he never thought he'd be part of. Behind him, Isabelle approached quietly, her footsteps soft against the grass. She stood beside him, the two of them sharing a moment of quiet reflection as the festivities continued. Isabelle didn't speak, letting the weight of the moment settle naturally. Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't the same man she had encountered at the gala months ago, burdened by doubt and the weight of his past. He was someone who had reclaimed his worth, someone who had found his place not just in her world but in the hearts of so many others. "Thank you," Ethan finally said, his voice low but steady. Not for the opportunity or the resources, but for believing in him when he couldn't believe in himself. Isabelle didn't respond with words she didn't need to. Instead, she simply nodded, her own heart full of gratitude for the bond they had rediscovered. The night ended with a round of applause and cheers from the community, a celebration not just of progress but of resilience, hope, and the power of connection. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan lingered for a moment longer, soaking in the joy that surrounded him. He realized that his life, once filled with uncertainty and struggle, had finally found its purpose. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself lingering near a quiet corner of the event, his gaze fixed on the joyful faces of the community. Children darted through the crowds with wide grins, their laughter carrying above the gentle hum of conversation. For years, Ethan had only dreamed of making a difference. But now, surrounded by the tangible fruits of his labor, he realized that this wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a beginning. Isabelle stood nearby, her presence subtle but unwavering. She wasn't there to take credit or be in the spotlight. She watched as Ethan interacted with the families, his words inspiring a confidence that hadn't existed before. For her, this wasn't about philanthropy. It was about something far deeper. She had not just rediscovered an old friend, but had played a role in helping him become the man he was always meant to be. Ethan turned to her, his eyes filled with a quiet gratitude that didn't need words. For all the doubts and fears that had shadowed his journey, this moment silenced them. He saw in Isabelle a reflection of the bond they had shared as children, built on trust, respect, and the unspoken understanding that they were better together. In the days that followed the festival, Ethan's confidence continued to grow. His work expanded beyond the immediate project, and he began mentoring others who were struggling to find their footing. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, was thriving. The communities he served viewed him as a bridge between their struggles and a brighter future. They saw themselves in his story, in the resilience he carried, and in the humility with which he led. Ethan became a living testament to the idea that no matter where you start, the right opportunities and the right people can change everything. Isabelle, too, found herself transformed by their journey. Her world of high-powered meetings and endless accolades felt less consuming now. She devoted more of her time to projects like Ethan's, finding joy in the connections they fostered. One afternoon, as they walked through one of the revitalized neighborhoods, Isabelle pointed out a community center that had been recently refurbished. "This used to be just an empty lot," she said, her voice tinged with pride. Ethan nodded, his gaze scanning the lively space. "And now, it's a place where people can come together. That's what matters." Their conversation shifted to shared memories, to dreams they once had and those they had rediscovered along the way. For both of them, the journey had been as much about healing the past as it was about building the future. On a crisp autumn morning, Ethan stood at the front of a modest auditorium packed with smiling faces. It was the opening of a new training center, a cornerstone of the community initiative he had helped build. The room buzzed with anticipation as he stepped up to the podium, the applause that greeted him warm and genuine. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over him. "When I started this journey, I didn't believe I had a place in this world," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But someone reminded me that our worth isn't measured by where we start, but by the impact we have on others." His words resonated deeply, drawing nods and smiles from the audience. As he spoke, Isabelle sat in the front row, her expression a mixture of pride and quiet admiration. She had seen Ethan's journey from doubt to confidence, from struggle to triumph, and she knew that this moment was more than just a milestone, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. When the ceremony ended, Ethan and Isabelle stood together in the sunlight, watching as families entered the center for the first time. "This is your legacy, Ethan," Isabelle said, her tone soft but resolute. He shook his head, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's ours. You reminded me that I could dream again, and that's something I'll never forget." Months passed, and the changes sparked by Ethan and Isabelle's collaboration began to ripple outward. The training center became a hub of activity, offering workshops, mentoring programs, and resources for aspiring entrepreneurs. Stories of triumph emerged: single parents starting small businesses, young adults breaking cycles of poverty, and communities coming together in ways they hadn't in years. For Ethan, life had taken on a rhythm he never thought possible. His days were filled with purpose, his nights with a sense of peace that had once eluded him. His transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. He no longer saw himself as someone defined by struggle, but as a person who had found strength through it. Isabelle watched these developments with a heart full of pride. She, too, had changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her world of high stakes and constant pressure now felt balanced by the humanity she had rediscovered. Helping Ethan reminded her of the importance of connection, of reaching back to the roots that had shaped her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan invited Isabelle to the lake where they had spent countless childhood summers. The air was crisp, the water still, reflecting the soft hues of the setting sun. "I never thought I'd be back here," Ethan said, his voice quiet but content. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "It does," Isabelle replied, her gaze fixed on the water. "But I'm glad we found our way back." As they sat by the lake, their conversation drifted to the future. Ethan spoke of expanding the project to other communities, of giving more people the opportunities he had been given. Isabelle shared her vision of creating a foundation dedicated to mentorship and community development, inspired by their journey together. But more than the plans and dreams, what mattered was the unspoken understanding between them. They were no longer just friends who had reconnected. They were partners in a shared mission, their bond deeper than it had ever been. "I've learned something through all of this," Isabelle said, her tone reflective. "Success isn't about what we achieve for ourselves, it's about what we help others achieve." Ethan nodded, a soft smile on his lips. "And sometimes, the people who help us the most are the ones we least expect." As the last rays of sunlight faded, they stood together in silence, the stillness of the lake mirroring the peace they both felt. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but it had led them to a place of purpose, connection, and hope. In the months that followed, the foundation Isabelle envisioned became a reality. Named after the lake where their friendship had been rekindled, the Hale Remington initiative quickly gained traction, attracting supporters and volunteers who believed in its mission. At its heart was Ethan, who continued to lead with the humility and resilience that had defined his journey. His story became a source of inspiration, shared at conferences and community gatherings, reminding others that transformation was possible no matter where you started. Isabelle, too, found herself embracing a new chapter. Her success was no longer defined by wealth or accolades, but by the impact she could make. Together, they created a legacy that was far greater than anything they could have imagined alone. As the initiative celebrated its first anniversary, Ethan and Isabelle stood on the stage of the training center, surrounded by the people whose lives they had touched. The applause that filled the room wasn't just for their achievements, but for the hope and possibilities they represented. Ethan glanced at Isabelle, his expression one of quiet gratitude. "We did it," he said simply. She smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "No, Ethan, you did it. I just helped you see it."